Hi, how's it going? This is Fyrirmaster Ingvar Johannesson from Iceland. Fyrirmaster Sibit. And yeah, it's time for the seventh round. And well, this is recorded on the rest day for both the men and the women. So this will be about the seventh round for the men, sixth round for the women. And now we have caught up. So hopefully for the last few rounds we can do the recaps, quickly after the round. But yeah, some interesting things happening in this round, and every round from here, things are. I mean, every mistake is going to be important because it's really tight, really close up at the top for the men, and the battle between Satonsky and Crush is going to be interesting as always, and they have yet to face each other. So for the men, let's go on to the games, and yeah, for the men, Lendeman, despite his loss, he's still leading now with Kopian, and trailing them with half a point are the veterans Kamsky and Onishuk. And okay, let's have a look at the games. I'm actually gonna not look at Ehrenberg and Muller. Both of these guys are not in contention for the title. I'm gonna start with Ramirez against Josh Friedel real quick. Friedel won his first game in the sixth round, moving to an even score. And in this game, he employed the open Ruy Lopez, which is basically this move: knight takes e4. This constitutes the open Ruy Lopez. This is the main line here: d5, d takes e5, bishop e6. And I think either c3 or knight bt2. Can't remember. Bishop e3, okay, and then eventually knight bt2. Rook e1 was played, pawn to d4. And I mean, things can become pretty sharp, and g5 is certainly our sharp move here by Friedel, offering up early complications. But I think I read somewhere that he messed up some lines from his preparation. And here queen f3 is a little bit of an annoying move, because we're attacking this knight, and the knight can't move because then we hit this guy. And it's actually a little bit tricky to cover this guy. And just looking at it now, king here. Can we maybe play a move like bishop d5? Still attacking this. Once again, if we move. Okay, let's say we take on e5, rook takes e5, queen takes, bishop takes a8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Pawns are equal, but the black pawn structure is not looking great. So I'm just guessing here. The main point is that we can't take, because then we take the knight next move. But I'm not sure. Bishop here, okay, we can take on f7 maybe. But it's possible that we have something even stronger. Possibly e6. Nah, probably not, but we can at least take on f7 and then play e6. That looks dangerous. But maybe we have something stronger. Maybe also bishop d5 here. Hitting this again, and let's say the queen protects. Now we can play e6. Something like this. It's a complicated position, but he decided to give up the rook on a8, so sacrificing the exchange. But okay, yeah, not really sacrificing it because the knight on d2 was hanging, which I missed. So he's actually got two pieces for the rook, and Ramirez has one pawn for it. So actually things turned out quite okay here for black. And yeah, I believe in the end the knights actually prevailed here. Now we got an ending. White only has one pawn for the pawn for the rook against the two knights. And yeah, seems like the knights are getting good squares. If you have two knights against the rook, you have to have some good squares that you can post up on, and black seems to have it here. In general, the knights have the potential to be the worst combination against the rook, but of course the bishop pair is the best. Bishop plus knight. I mean, just like in general. But okay, got the pawn on a3 and on the pawn on c2. So it looks like Ramirez was trying here to sacrifice some pawns to activate his kingside majority, but after some complications, it was just too much. Black made a queen here, and yeah, he took the knight, but then he just resigned. The material, that's just too much. Queen and the knight for 2 rooks. So this means that Friedel actually moves to +1, which is now 4 out of 7, and that's actually not far from contention, because well, he's now in 3rd place, and let's not immediately spoil what the top guys are doing. So Shankland against Nordetsky, Daniel having a solid tournament, and Shankland, well, I mean, nothing horrible, but let's see. We have the King's Indian, and he surprised him, I think, with pawn takes d4. He wanted to avoid some prepared lines by Shankland, who tends to be pretty well prepared. And yeah, he played knight c6. So rook e8, f3, knight c6. There's actually a funny line here, which I played from time to time, c6. And here the theoretical move is king h1 to get out of danger on this diagonal. Knight bd7, I believe, bishop g5. And here the tricky move, oh no, h6 first, bishop h4, and a5, a tricky waiting move. Hoping for queen of d2. When black springs the trap with knight takes e4. Now if we take on d8, we take on d2. And if we take here, we take on h4, and this bishop is tremendous. And to add insult to injury, this attack is not working because of this counterattack here. Boom. Attacking knight and threatening checkmate, which is something you can't avoid, so black wins material here. But okay, that was very much off tangent, so knight c6 was played, bishop e5, and here knight d5 is a known pawn sacrifice and has scored well for white, but Norditsky said that he had looked at it quite extensively with the computer and thought he could make it work for black. And lo and behold, that's what more or less happened. Bishop f5, and things seem to be more or less under control for black here. I mean, if you take on b7 here, then maybe we can start taking on e5. So he takes on d6, but now we take with the queen. And taking on b7 now. Yeah, it's very complicated. Maybe knight c5, trying to get some exchanges going. I'm not sure. It's a bit complicated. What do we do after this? Maybe. Yeah, it's tricky. Maybe. Okay, just trying to improvise here. Bishop takes e5, queen takes e5, bishop takes f5. Can I make this work? Probably not. It's too much. I was thinking the bishop couldn't retreat, and then we play rook d8, trying to trap this, but we can play maybe bishop d7. And that's too much. So I wonder what happens if rook takes b7 here. Also, I missed that maybe white has knight takes c7 in some cases. So I mean, in general, when you're looking at chess games, if there's something you don't understand, you should actually take the time to try and figure out what's going on. and preferably, you know, without the computer. I'm not sure we have time for it here, but it's just a general training advice. But I'm actually curious here. We don't have time to have me spend 10 minutes here trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm gonna turn on the comp, and we might have the sound off for a little bit. Yeah, of course. I should have noticed that. That was bad. It's always so easy afterwards, isn't it? It's always easy afterwards. Okay, I could be slightly off from where I started, but okay, we can play knight c3, which I didn't see. Well, with a double attack, and if we take, then we can take on d3. So shame on me. It's late at night, so come on. What can you do? So okay, he played rook b3 instead. Knight back to e7. Knight takes e7. Rook takes e7. So a complicated game, but Black seems to be doing quite well here. And yeah, mainly because his pieces are pretty well centralized. I mean, all the pieces on the central files here, good bishops, well posted knight. So add to that Black is a pawn up, so we can almost say he has a winning advantage. And even one more point, he has the better king. So just from these points we could... okay, and there's some tactics here. He attacks the queen, but we counterattack the queen. Now if we take on c5, we take on f3. Let's have a look at that. We take on f3, we're up a piece, so if we try to regain it, then we go here, we still up a piece. So he took on d3, but now knight takes f2, hitting the queen. If you move the king, we take on d3, and again, we're going to be up a piece because we get the rook here. So he took on f2, but then queen c6 check, and now we're hitting the queen. Our queen is safe. White's queen is lost. The game is indeed over. Yeah. We could perhaps add that, yeah, oops, if we move the queen, then we simply bishop e4. Go bishop e4, and queen's lost. So yeah, like I said, game over, and this means that Naroditsky is also on +1 now. Oh, no, +1, no. He's also on +1 now. So, you know, Naroditsky and Friedel creating some outside chances of catching up with the leaders during the end. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, but there's always a chance, isn't there? Isn't there? So, on to Onyshuk against Gariev. Tough pairing for Onyshuk. Black pieces against Timur Gariev, who yeah, played a really interesting game against Josh Friedel in the 6th round, which you should check out if you haven't. Interesting opening, and you know, dynamic middle game, and an interesting end game as well, where well, probably he blundered and didn't have to lose. But okay, here we have sort of a Catalan, and bishop back to e7. So I mean, this coupled with this means that maybe it's a little bit more tricky to win the pawn on c4. So might be that White is simply gambiting the pawn now with pawn to e4. That's also a common idea, to gambit this c4 pawn for the big center here. The big central pawn. So bishop e3. So a slight lead in development for White, but Black will catch up pretty quickly, so we have to do something with it. Pawn to c5. My guess here is pawn to d5. Well, it takes on c5. Knight g4. Okay, we can't lose this bishop, so we have to do something about it. Bishop f4. Knight takes c5. And how to impact the pawn? e5. Still down a pawn, and we exchange the queens. And black's only problem right now is the bishop here on d7. He has to finish development. If he can, maybe he can make the extra pawn count, but if he can't, then chances are white might win the pawn back. So black to move. So the question, of course, should be: can we play bishop d7 to c6? Probably can't because of. Well, maybe we can. Let's see. Knight d3. Again, hitting this bishop, and in an ideal world, probably taking it after h3. Knight to h6. Bishop takes h6. So the question is, could we have taken on f4? Yeah, well, now the question is, maybe we do we take on f4 or t4? Big question. If we take on f4, we'll give away this square, but maybe the black pieces aren't particularly well posted, so maybe knight d2 and then we win the pawn, and still problems with this bishop to develop. But we did give up some weaknesses, so long term black has the bishop pair and good square for the knight. So maybe. Well, it's tricky because if you try to solve development here, I mean, we're not going to take this because rook b8 takes b2, but after knight takes c4, I mean, now we can think about taking because the pawn is protected, and now we're hitting the bishop as well. And bishop c6 might not be what black wants to do here, because now maybe we can think about taking, and this knight is dominating because it's can't be kicked away, it protects the pawn, and we can post a knight on e4 and think about putting another one on d6. This looks good for white. You can also play a rook d7 as a move that suggests itself here. So this would probably be an endgame advantage for white. That probably explains knight h6. So bishop takes, pawn takes. So now we have managed to give black some structural weaknesses to compensate for the pawn loss. But after b3, we're threatening to win back the pawn because we can't take on b3 because then we undermine the knight. But bishop takes a3, knight c5, no, knight b2. Knight c5, the bishop could run into trouble actually. So black is still up a pawn, but it's a double-edged pawn, so no big deal I think. Knight e4. Still black has these development issues. But knight c5, okay. Now he's kind of almost threatening to untangle here. f6, bishop takes f6. Rook b8. And now we're ready to move bishop d7 next move. So what does it do? Knight d2, another attacker on b7, so we can't move bishop d7. Then black attacks this. Knight e4 takes, knight takes. Oh, it takes on d4, yeah. I forgot. I was too focused on covering this, but of course we take the bishop. Okay, we now yeah, most likely we simplify here. Okay, I thought it was simple, but knight c5, knight e4, e5. So black is, well, up some pawns now, but we can take on e5 at any given moment. But okay, here, c6. Utilizing this pin, so still down these pawns, but definitely compensation it seems. And maybe we can just take on b7 and take on e5, and it should be close to a dead draw. Rook e7 takes. Do we have to go for this pawn immediately? I'm thinking if b6, then rook here, and that could be a problem. So rook d8, yeah, he takes on b7. But we can play a5. a5, rook here, king g7. So most likely these pawns will be exchanged. The D pawn for the A pawn. That's what happened. And yeah, this should be a drawn rook ending. So after all these complications, I mean, he gave away this pawn. And the thing is, even without the black H pawn here, some of these positions with F and H pawn are in fact drawn. So strong players such as Onishuk will not have problems drawing this, and especially after he wins the pawn. Then look at this. He doesn't even bother with trying to hold the pawn because he knows that this is a theoretical draw. He has the Philidor position here set up. He's going to defend on the 6th rank, and once the pawn moves up, he's going to go to the 1st rank and give checks. I'm not sure we're going to see that even, but yeah, they just agree the door here. Of course, they both know this. They're not going to waste any more time on this position. So a draw in carry of Onishuk, and this means that Onishuk is on 4 as well, right? Or 4.5. I'm confused. No, he has 4. 4 for Onishuk, he's on +1. And let's see Russian against Kopian. Russian with white, Kopian with black. And again we see this Catalan where black goes bishop e4 and then back to e7. Excuse me for the arrow. But the thing is that the bishop on d2 interrupts white's normal flow of development here, so he has to lose a tempo as well. Because in this line usually the bishop goes to b2, but now he has to move it again to f4, g5. He goes to f4. And here very often we see a kind of a dance where I think he will go back to f6 here. Bishop will go back to f4. Okay, yeah. And we see this dance here. Do you want to draw? No, I don't want to draw. Do you want to draw? And then somebody goes, no, I don't want to draw. And it's kind of a macho dance. Sometimes neither wants to draw. They just want to test, you know, see what the other guy does. A little bit of a game of chicken. So b6, b3, bishop b2. And usually e4 is played here. So we see the bishop got back to b2 eventually where it belongs. So well, the tempos eventually kind of equaled out, I guess. The pawn takes c4, knight takes c4. We have a typical closed Catalan position here, so to say. Most likely the queen goes to a1 here, with a battery on this diagonal. And bishop takes d4. So a position like this, it's you know, still strategically complex, and anything can happen really. So I'm wondering if what is starting to think about some aggressive intentions here. Probably doesn't have enough pieces ready for an attack here, so I doubt he will sacrifice yet. With b1, knight f8, with d1, centralizing everything, and at times when this can get drawish if all the pieces get chopped off the board, but let's see what happens. h6, pushing the knight back, so in fact rook d1 is kind of a sacrifice, because of course he realized that after h6 the knight must move back, but now he gets he loses a pawn, but he gains the bishop here, so this bishop is unopposed. a5, rook takes, rook takes. So now the question is if you can make it count, but maybe he just overlooked something, because it's hard to see any hardcore compensation for white here really. He's down a pawn and black is just posting his bishop on an aggressive square. His king is okay. He can easily take care of this a pawn, pawn to a5. So where's white's play? Black is off a pawn. It's looking like he will simply convert it. And now we have an ending, he's off a pawn. In general we talk about the queen and the knight tandem being stronger than the queen and the bishop, so we should be close to technically winning here for black. And g5, you know, come on. Cementing this knight on the f4 square. So it should be just a matter of technique here. White tries to give up a pawn for some counterplay, but now it's down 2 pawns. He can get the a6 pawn back. But this means that black has centralized his king. Should be safe here. No jacks. Queen is out of play for the moment. We have a passed a pawn. This is attacked. Ugh. Looking bad for white. Looking really bad. Knight c3. This knight might come to e2. We have a threat here. Can white do anything about it? Queen g7. Now there's also the possibility of just running this pawn down the board. Can black, white do anything about it? The queen can't really enter the game, so I'm wondering if a4. Okay, knight e2. Queen has to go to a1 to prevent the mate. But maybe a4 now, and white doesn't really have any moves. Yeah, a4, h4. I mean, we can ignore it, but taking it should be fine. Takes. These just look like desperation moves from white. Queen c1. Yeah, finally, white gave up all these pawns in desperation, but now simply he switched around. Queen c1 check, exchanging the queens, and too many pawns up for white, and this pawn is running down the board, making a new queen. Resignation, and this means that Akopian is now on 5 out of 7, and he's leading. And now Onishuk, Narditsky, and Josh Riddell are on 4. So Akopian leading with 5, and the other guys on 4. And the only guy who can catch him, the last game we haven't looked at, is Kamsky against Lendeman. So Lendeman is the only guy who can catch Akopian, but if Kamsky wins, he can remain half a point behind Akopian. So 3 wins in a row for Akopian, pretty nice. And Kamsky with white here against Lendeman. And by transposition we reach a King's Indian attack setup. And most of the time we reach this position via a French move order. So instead of starting with knight f3, we actually start with do this. We should start with e4, e6, d3, d5, something like this. Knight g3, c5, g3, and we reach a similar position. So they went with this move order instead. c6, rook e1, and b5. So that's the standard plan for black here, to go for a pawn storm on the queen side. These pawns will advance up the board. And white will play h4, e5, attack on the king side. That's indeed what happened. e5, knight f1, standard move. This bishop will come to f4 to protect this pawn. And the white h-pawn will go to h4. And the reason we go to h4 is, in some cases, to stop pawn to g5. You know, dislodging the bishop. And also just to attack h5. Now we might think about h6 in some cases, weakening the black squares. And here I think, I'm not sure he made that move, but a3 is often a move here to stop black's advance on the queen side. But he didn't worry about it, he simply played h6. But maybe black has to react anyway, and then we can think about it. No a3 for white here. So knight maneuvers from h2 to g4. And white's long-term plan here is something like bishop f4, queen d2, and then move the bishop to g5, exchange this bishop, and that will weaken the black squares around the king. And we can think about giving checkmate. So knight d4, and this is okay, opening the c file, but also a little slow because of the b3. Our only weakness, well, for black, the only weakness is attacking the c2 pawn. And that should be easy to cover. It also makes this bishop a little bit of an empty piece, because it has to wait for this pawn to drop off the board before it can attack d3, so not really effective at the moment. So knight h2, he goes back, and probably he wants to attack this d4 pawn now. So changing plans because of the new structure. Knight f3. b6, bishop to g5, which was always the strategical idea. Queen d2, and knight f3. Okay, he gives up this pawn, but we're attacking this guy instead. Let's see. Queen takes c2, queen takes b4. Okay, exchanging a pair of pawns, but after queen g5, queen b4, d2, c1. At some point, the d4 pawn dropped. Yeah, queen f8 back, and at this point, that's looking like a forced move, because if we go for some, let's say we attack this d3 pawn and queen check, we have to interpose. If you interpose the queen, we drop the knight off the board, so knight interposes, but now we can't defend anymore on g7. Knight was covering f6, so now we can go there. So that explains queen f8, but that drops d4 pawn. Didn't take it immediately, but now it took it. And yeah, probably we can't take on d3. I don't think it took on d3 when king h8. If you take on d3, don't think it matters which piece. I'm wondering if we can take on e6. Probably not immediately, because it will open up an attack here. So I was thinking about this, but it doesn't seem to work because of queen takes f2. And actually it's white 2 might be in trouble. So therefore maybe we play a move like king g1 first. And then we can think about taking. But okay. Still with king h8. Prophylactic move of sorts, you know, against this knight takes e6 threat. Knight back to e2. But now after all of this, white is a pawn up. This d4 pawn that we won. Black didn't regain it, so sort of going from a kingside attack. Now white is just trying to hammer home his pawn advantage. Covering this, and we couldn't take on b5 because of the skewer, so rook back, rook d3, attacking this guy, giving up b5, but now we have a dangerous passed a pawn. And Kamsky just made this count. Attacking this, now the queen is tied down, bishop b5. What does the bishop do? It dominates the knight. Dominates the knight. So he tried to free it, but now we just take it. And with A, the black queen tied down, and B, all the white pawns completely covered by, well, the queen and then the rook. Black can't really do anything. King g2. Just showing who's boss here. And black can't do anything, and he simply resigned. And king g2, it's kind of a boss move. It's like, okay, you know, your move, buddy. You can't do anything. So my suggestion, yeah, you got it, resign. And yeah, since the queen can't move, I mean, what can we do? The rook can't attack anything on its own. We can ram this pawn down the board, and if black tries to free himself with a rook move, the problem is that we always come to f6. We threaten mate. We come back to defend it. Well, number one, we can play queen g7 and simply exchange and win the pawn ending. Can't stop this pawn. It's probably the best way. So resignation, and this means, yeah, again, Kopian 5 out of 7, followed by Kamsky 4.5, and then a bunch of people on 4, most notably on Chuk. And of course Lendeman, despite losing the 2 games, he's still, you know, near the top. And then we have two new guys, Naroditsky and Friedel, joining sort of the leading pack, but at the moment, Akopian and Kamsky look the most likely to capture the crown this time around. But still, I mean, 4 rounds remain, so anything can happen. Anything can happen. And let's move over to the women, where, well, the tension is just as heavy. And Let's start with Satomsky. She was playing against Camille Blackenskyte, who has been having well, a swinging tournament, you know. Uh, Losing games she shouldn't have lost, and then drawing a game she should have lost. So, but that, I mean, that happens in chess. So here we have symmetrical position, sort of a Taras-ish development by black. And here are these waiting moves a3, a6. And the point of this is that we don't really want to move our bishop. If we move our bishop, then we have to lose the time to take on c4. And then black can win a tempo here with b5. Take on d4, get a isolate the queen pawn position. So white elected to take on c5 first, but then black can take immediately. Black bishop takes c5, and that's what he wants. Okay, to take in one move. So bishop to a7, b5, not a5. And okay, black has this isolated pawn, but she does have active pieces, and that's what you want when you have the isolated pawn. You want to have active pieces to compensate. Camille seemed to play a good game here. Now the pawn is on c4. Okay, it's still weak, but it's a little bit better off. Easier to cover it. I mean, now it's a pass pawn. Can be more dangerous. And also, opens a d-file for both. But the thing is, white didn't seem to have much here. Now he also has a weak pawn. And after knight d2, nice interesting move, because take here, then it's black who's winning material because it was check, so we have to move the queen. So now we get exchanges, knight takes e2. And, I mean, there's no big reason why black should be much worse here, if at all. So pawn storm here, h6. And let's just move on quickly. We had this endgame where all the pawns are equal, but I'm gonna move to the critical point. Okay, white actually won a pawn here, but it's hard to make progress. And after this, okay, she won one pawn back. And it's gonna be really hard to make these pawns count. Both of them flank pawns. And what actually happened eventually was the following. Rook takes a4. Now, come on, this is completely equal. It just has to be. Pawn against pawn, flank pawn against flank pawn. And black should never lose this, come on. Unless I'm missing something, I haven't checked it, but surely we can play like knight b7. Just has to be. And I'm wondering if... okay. Okay, now I see. Now I see. Maybe the knight is actually lost, because after this, fucking mate. Okay. So in fact, she played king h4. When I first looked at this game briefly, I actually thought that she sacrificed the knight just to get the pawn, because this is a well-known draw. Rook against rook and rook against rook and knight. One of the more easier draws, because we'll come to it. So okay, black has the extra pawn here, and actually my advice here, if you get this type of position, and I mean, I've had rook against rook and knight and the other way around a few times, and it's an easy draw, but I have seen cases where black having an extra pawn or the side with the rook, of course if the rook and the knight have the pawn, they win, but the extra pawn is irrelevant for the other guy, and actually it could be harmful. And I have seen guys, my friend was a grandmaster, he once lost a game in the World Junior Championship where he actually had the extra pawn, and it cost him It actually cost him a Zugzwang. So my advice is simply to get rid of this pawn. Just ram it down the board and let white capture it. And from there, the draw is quite easy. So okay, so you want a5. But from here, I mean, you can even put your king on the back rank. Okay, so he keeps it there, but once you put it on the back rank, all you have to do is pin the goddamn knight. Okay, here you give a check. I mean, how do you checkmate with white? Jack. I would have probably given another check. But okay, 94 back. Jack. 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 Okay, and why not? Can't we just move the pawn here? Because we always have this. It's no mate, then king d6, then rook check. That's my guess, but I mean, why protect the pawn? It just restricts your rook, so I don't understand it. So rook d1, knight a4 check, king c8, knight d5, king b8. Everything is still okay. Now a4. And protect the pawn. I don't understand it. Just give away the pawn. Finally, he gives it away, but maybe because he lost it. But you just give it away. Give it away. Give it away. Give it away now. Because if you keep the pawn, I mean, once you give it away, you can just start counting the 50 moves. But if you keep it and you're moving it, then you're just giving your opponent extra moves to give you a hard time. And here, unbelievably, like I said, just pin the knight. You want rook h1, rook d1. How does white make any progress here? Rook check here, we go over here. Rook somewhere, we can just keep the pin, whatever. And you can't force the king. You can't force it anywhere. So like king here, like Czechoslovakia. King has to move and no problems. But instead, rook h1 and now made into 97 check. And she was signed because checkmate. So an unbelievable blunder. I mean, after a long game, but that's sometimes you know what happens. You play a long game and get tired, and easy things become hard, and eventually mistakes creep in, and that's what happened. And this could be potentially the deciding round for the women because, lo and behold, Satonsky wins. But let's have a look at the cross game because Satonsky should have drawn. Should have been a draw. Very important. So the cross game, we have the Blumenfeld Gambit, which is, well, a cousin of Banco Gambit, and kind of a cross between the Banco and the Benoni. The difference is, okay, the center is more open, and in the Banco we fianchetto the bishop, and we have a closed central structure like this, actually d6 and c5. And here, black gives up the pawn for a bigger center, and we can put the bishops on dangerous diagonals. White tries to break up the center here, make the pawn move to d4, and this means that we have some white squares we can try and post up on. So e5, knight back, knight a4. And actually I think, I mean, the Blumenfeld is interesting, but it also looks, I mean, a little bit risky. I mean, we're giving up a pawn, and I mean, I'm not saying I would be super comfortable here with white, even though we're up a pawn. Black has definite compensation, but let's see what happened. Looks like things are pretty well under control for arena cross here. Eventually, okay, bishop f3, closing things up. Yeah, this pawn, even though she gave one pawn back, it's now restricting the pieces, closing the diagonal. This rook is kind of funnily posted, so if you have to take on f3 now, then all the white squares are horribly weak. So, interesting decision. She sacrifices the exchange here. I guess to keep this bishop, because otherwise white will gain full control over the white squares. So, c4, d3, bishop e7. But okay, can we not just take? Knight takes d5, bishop check, and she takes on d5. and king f8. So what do we have here? White is off the exchange and the pawn. And another pawn. So this is looking a little bit desperate for black. Rook f3, and in fact everything seems to be well under control for white here, and we're on move 35. Leading by the exchange and a rook. No, sorry, exchange and the rook. Exchange and a pawn. And here she starts giving some checks to reach the time control move 40. But actually here, white can take on c5. Okay, I'm not saying I would have seen it, but here comes the downside of running low on time. You can't calculate things. And in fact, this looks quite dangerous. Knight takes f3. I mean, if you take with a pawn, we just get mated. Checkmate. And if we take with the bishop, then this is really dangerous. Not taking the king, also checkmate. And if we take with the pawn, then black starts checking. Probably something like this. Well, not allowing the queen on f2 maybe. But we have a choice. Yeah, I could have started with queen takes f3, of course. So this one. And once you go here, I want to check. Yeah, so as you can see, it's tough to calculate. But I thought this was dangerous. And the point was that if knight takes queen takes c5, oops, knight takes f3. I think king h1 was actually the move, which is quite amazing. And now we're simply threatening to take. And it's important that the queen covers g1, so there's no rook takes h3. But okay, I admit I saw this on the computer, and this was like plus 10 for white. But okay, I mean, with no time on the clock, it's easy to see ghosts, and you want to play it safe. You don't want to give your opponent chances. So she gave a check here, and she wanted, I know what she wanted to do. She wanted to postpone her decision until after the time control, when she got time. So queen b6 check. But here the thing is, king g7, 39, rook c1, knight takes f3 check, and here we reach the time control. And unfortunately for Irina Krush, during her last few moves, she missed black's next move. I'm thinking at some point black had a bottom. I think even here d2 was the move. Gonna cheat a little bit, turn on the computer, which is really slow. Yeah, okay, it's not even working for me, but I think d2 was a move here. But the moves he played in the game was rook takes h3. Interesting. The point is, of course, as before, king takes allows mate on g3. So we have to play pawn takes. King g1 we probably can't play well. Okay, we might have moves like d2, I don't know, but rook takes f3 seems sufficient because the pin and black wins material. But I think, yeah, I think around here d2 was the move, and we'll come into it later. But she played rook takes h3, queen g3 check, and this is first queen takes f3, king g1, queen g3 check, king f1. Yeah, this is similar to what we had before, not exactly the same. You remember the queen was on what? Yeah, c5, rook on c4. And in the other position I thought maybe king e1 to d2. But here that's dangerous. So king g1. And we ended up with a perpetual. But actually, if we had played d2 earlier, white didn't really have any good move with the rook. So if we go back, I hope I got it correct. I think so. We played d2 here. I think rook d1 is almost the only move. but it might not be best. But the point is, now we take, and if we play like in the game, the rook on d1 will be hanging, and that's a big problem. I think even we can play something like this even. With king f1, still queen f3. I think the point was to yeah, try and take it with check. So we take here next move. So this might have been winning for black, which would have been quite a turnaround, but instead she didn't play d2, so in fact after a few checks here, there's no way out for white. I mean, if you they agreed draw here, I mean if you go here we can do a check here, and then we go back, and there's no way out. So yeah, quite a dramatic blunder there by Crush. I mean, should have been winning. But yeah, that's chess for you right there. I mean, things can turn around in a hurry. Maybe a quick look at Abrahamian's game, because he's, I mean, realistically the only one who can catch up with Crush and Satonsky. Have they played Abrahamian and Satonsky? Don't think they have. Just gonna check it. Abrahamian against Satonsky. Abrahamian and Kina. Ah, they played. Yeah, Satonsky beat Abrahamian. Okay. Well, that means he is more or less out of contention, because if Satonsky beats Crush and Abrahamian can catch up with Crush, then actually I got it the other way around. If Crush beats Satonsky, then Abrahamian is still going to be half a point behind, so it's going to be tough to catch up. And yeah, there are 3 rounds left for the women, as opposed to 4 for the men. But okay, anyway, I mean, like I said, the only one with a realistic chance. I'm not sure how realistic it is, but we had this line in the Italian game. I haven't looked at this game, so don't know what happened. We'll just have a quick look at it. And it actually looks quite dry and positional. White has this isolated pawn, but she's trying to get activity for it. Can black play f6 here? Probably it's too risky somehow. Let's see if he played it. He played it, okay. So interesting to see what Tatev had in mind here. Ah, yeah. They simply move the knight. Once we move this knight, the knight on e7 is going to be attacked because of the pin here. So that's what she did. Okay, so she didn't even take on g5. And now knight e4. So maybe this is just a slight weakening of the diagonal. And if you, okay, with the king on h8, if you move this knight ever and we keep up bishop here on a2, you have to look out for tactics on the h file. Okay, she moves it to b1, so I mean, okay. But yeah, the main point is this could be a strong piece here if white wants to attack. Could have taken this pawn, but it looks dangerous. You can play king g2, attack it. We go here, we're starting to open up. I mean, you can take on g5, but we're starting also to open up the h file, which can be risky. So in general, okay, we have a passed pawn. No, we have an isolated queen pawn, and we want to block it. So my feeling is, okay, white has some initiative here, but shouldn't be anything critical. Black, however, gave up a pawn here. And what's that? That just looks like a blunder. That just looks like a blunder. Like she missed queen b4 or something? Yeah, she must have thought that she would win the rook on e1, but just queen b4 covering the rook, and there's nothing. So looked like black just completely collapsed in time trouble. And yeah, this gives Abrahamian some chances, but we'll see. Like I said, it's going to be between Satonsky and Crush. And yeah, really looking forward to their game. But okay, yeah, remember this round because this could be really crucial. Where Crush had a winning position, almost lost it. I mean, okay, at one point, but had to give up a draw. And on the other hand, Satonsky had a dead draw, but managed to win. So this could be the crucial stroke of luck that decides the U.S. Women's Championship. The men still have 4 rounds to play, so anything can happen. And yeah, but my guess is Akopian and Kamsky will be the ones battling it out. So okay, I'll see you in the later rounds. And thanks for watching once again. Bye bye.